Hey, everybody, it's Rick Wilson. I am proud to be joined tonight on Lincoln Square for the strategy session with Stuart Stevens, Olivia Troy, and Jay Kuo. In this first block tonight, we're going to go for a full hour tonight, so strap in. We're talking the whole night about Los Angeles and about the rapid and dangerous transition of Donald Trump attempting to use the military for political, law enforcement, and optical ends that are anathema to what America has previously stood for. So I want to start out tonight with Olivia and Jay, and welcome to the show, guys. Thank you so much for coming on, and talk about this military parade that's coming up this weekend in Washington. This is a very big departure from a lot of other American military parades because it doesn't celebrate the accomplishments on the battlefield of men and women on the battlefield, but it's more been designed to celebrate Donald Trump. Talk to us, and I'll start with you, Jay. Talk to us about how different this is from other moments in American history where the military came through the streets of New York or Washington or Los Angeles under very different circumstances.
Sure. I mean, we can trace it back to, the Civil War. That was really the first time. Right before the Civil War, there was a very small standing army, maybe like 16,000 people with
Yeah.
some, officer corps on top of it. And sort of we had to form a standing army at the point of a gun from the Confederacy. And so, in 1965, shortly after Lee surrendered at Appomattox, they had a big parade, and right down Pennsylvania Avenue. General Grant was there, and but there was a feeling that the war was over. There was a reason to celebrate. People were going home. This massive
Sure.
army was being decommissioned, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the end of hostilities there. There was so much bloodshed. This was a celebration of that. It was not about military prowess. I mean, the war was over, right? And so it was not to show somebody how strong we were. It was to come together and celebrate.
Right.
That was 1965. The next time it happened, World War One.
18, I think you mean.
Yeah, 1865. Wrong century. So then, in World War One, same sort of thing happened. The doughboys
Mm-hmm.
came home, and 200,000 of them around the country paraded, and there was that feeling like this large army that the United States had to, put together for purposes of fighting over in Europe. That was done. And again in World War II, the same thing happened again, and there was a kind of an exception, not really an exception, but at the end of the Gulf War, there was a feeling that this professional army needed to be celebrated because it had accomplished something. This wasn't about decommissioning at the end of it, but we had won a war, and
Yeah.
there was that Vietnam complex that people wanted to get past, and
Mm-hmm.
people wanted to come together and say, okay, this is the parade these soldiers deserve. We don't have any
Right.
of that here coming up. Where's the conflict that we're celebrating? What's the
Right.
decommissioning we're celebrating?
And I will say this: because I worked at the Defense Department for Cheney at the time. When we planned that parade, it was very much to front and center the families and the troops. It
Hmm.
wasn't the president having a triumphal, procession. It was very much centered on the work those men and women had done and on the families that had stayed behind and sacrificed while they were deployed. I actually went and dug out the old Desert Victory Parade plan, which was still in my files, and it was very much about that. It was not. It felt very different than this sort of like all hail the dear leader. But Olivia, you have a lot of insight on how Trump is obsessed about this sort of parade and this sort of imagery and this sort of connecting him to the courage of people who are braver than he would ever be. So talk to us a little bit about your views on that.
But it is going to be the Army's 250th birthday. And so I think he saw this as an opportunity to hijack it, is basically what he's done. Right. And
Yeah.
I remember the conversations during the first Trump administration because I was there. I had actually just started working in the White House,
Mm-hmm.
and he was obsessed with the idea of having this military parade.
Yep.
And honestly, it's because he was watching dictators around the world do this. He was watching Putin. Who does this? Putin does this.
Yep.
Right? I mean, we see this done in North Korea. That is a type of parades that they do, and they laud the dictator because it's really all about them. And so I think in Trump's view, he was watching this when he was president the first time around, and he was like, well, I need the military because he sees the military as his military. He doesn't see it as, people who took an oath to the Constitution who are serving the greater good of the country. And so now, fast forward, we put the kibosh on that. I know for a fact, General Mattis was back there back in the day. General Kelly was around, and they were like, no, this is not what we're going to do.
Right.
That's a distraction. This is not what the military is for. We're not going to just create this pomp and circumstance for no good reason.
Sure.
So fast forward, he's back in office. I'm not surprised to see that this is what he's done. He's throwing himself a big birthday party at the expense of taxpayers, and it's going to cost a lot of money. And
it's like $150 million, something like that.
It's insane. It's insane, Rick. And, we're watching the tanks roll through DC. I mean, that's what's happening because I'm still in the DC area, and you're seeing these tanks be brought in. We're going to watch these tanks destroy our streets and the recovery after that of what's going to happen. And it's just completely ludicrous to watch a president of the United States waste these things, right? I mean, waste taxpayers' money and also use the military fanfare in this way. And we're seeing it. He's down at Fort Bragg today. I was watching that coverage for better or worse. And I'm just thinking about the special ops command down there. I've trained with those guys, and, they're just doing their patriotic duty. But he's using them. And that to me is the most frustrating thing. Here's a group of people who have been trying to use the military to do their own bidding. And now here we are. And combine that with the LA protests and the National Guard deployments, which I'm sure you're going to get into, all of that combined is going to end now with this military parade spectacle at the end of the week. And I'm actually really worried about what happens this weekend here in the area.
Thank you, Olivia. So, Stuart, we were talking earlier today about just how divergent this idea was of deploying the military into the streets, and just how dark a path this could lead us down. Tell me a little bit about what you've been thinking, and about where this goes as Trump tries to normalize the presence of American active duty military forces on our streets.
Yeah, it seems to me that it really has a lot to do with how the Republican Party office holders respond, because we know the pattern of Trump. He's going to push until he gets pushed back. And so far, I haven't heard any pushback. And this is kind of personal to me in the sense that Roger Wicker is chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. I've known Roger all my life. We were pages together in Washington. I worked at his campaign. Our dads were big pals. And, I've always been quite fond of Roger. His entire life, he wanted to be in this position. He devoted his career basically to helping build alliances, helping build NATO. It's very foreign policy oriented. And to watch him usher in Pete Hegseth was like watching a friend drink themselves to death. Like, why are you doing this? Because he could have just said no. There's tens of thousands of qualified people out there who would bring respect to the office. You don't have to go. Now, I think that Trump does this just so he can humiliate people. He can prove, I'm going to give you somebody. He doesn't think Pete Hegseth's qualified, but I'm going to give you somebody here. I'm going to force you.
I'm going to make you back my play.
Yeah, the way Saddam used to make families pay for the bullet that killed their loved one and they put it down. This is just a level of humiliation. And once they're in, they're in. So I really think this is a moment where there is no destiny. It depends on how they respond.
He may be about trying to humiliate another world leader with this parade, because there's reporting in the Washington Post that this was about after he saw the Bastille Day, how great that was. He said, we've got to do better than Macron. There's so much personal ego involved here. He just wants to one-up Macron with this.
Yeah, if he knew his history better, he might sort of think about that Bastille Day thing, like,
right. Yeah. The presence of the national razor would
how that was actually, taking out power.
The irony.
But Jay, you recently wrote a piece about Trump wanting a police state. And this is part of that inevitability. If you want a police state, you have to convert the military into an element of your political power in the streets. Talk to us about that piece and tell us about the piece you have coming.
Sure. So, a lot of people sort of say, "Oh, we're headed straight to martial law," but there's an intermediate step that we need to talk about, which is this idea of a police state. A police state is where people are disappeared off the streets and held without due process. They're sent to gulags in foreign countries. They,
That
you know,
sounds vaguely familiar.
yeah, and so all these indicia of a police state are happening all around us. And so what he needs to do to advance us to the next level is to create enough pushback so that he could justify emergency decrees, one emergency decree after another. And he's already begun this. He said, I'm invoking Title 10, taking and federalizing, and he's just shy of invoking the Insurrection Act, right? To get there, he needs to actually say there's a rebellion. Now, it's no coincidence that he's got people like Stephen Miller saying it's an insurrection in LA. I mean, insurrection against whom? Like ICE? It doesn't make any sense. But the language we're paying close attention to because he's trying to push us toward justification for invocation of the Insurrection Act. And that takes us one step closer and allows the military to act as local law enforcement. They can't do that right now because of the Posse Comitatus Act. They can't do it, right?
Explain to people what that means, because suddenly a lot of folks are
It's a Latin phrase. Posse Comitatus basically means that you can't, local law enforcement can't use the military to support it in its activities. The military cannot involve itself in these civilian affairs that way. Posse Comitatus dates back to the 1800s, and it's been sort of the rule against, and it's codified in a weird way. It criminalizes people who attempt to do that. But a court could stop the use of military to conduct things like arrests and investigations of migrants unless he invokes the Insurrection Act, which is an exception. It allows them to act like local law enforcement. That's a very scary thing, and that's where I think we're headed.
Olivia, I'm sorry, Stuart, go ahead.
Yeah, for both of you, to get back just to the parade for a second, what do you think how should we react to that? I mean, how it's like, you're watching this as an American, you support, obviously, we have extraordinary military now. And yet it's being used. What do you think the right response? Olivia, what do you think? I struggle with this personally.
No, I hear you on that. I'm very conflicted myself, especially because I started my career working with the military and being deployed with them. And so I love the Army. I started working for them. And I think about this and, traditionally I grew up in a town where Fort Bliss, it's a military base. It's one of the largest military bases in the country. I grew up in El Paso and we love the military. We go to the parades there. We do the fireworks with them. And it's hard to think about in this situation, the struggle internally I have of, obviously I support them and I want to cheer them on. On the other hand, I have no interest in cheering on a wannabe dictator that's what he wants to be in our country. But I think that there are going to be, there's the No Kings protests that are happening around the country, the counter protests. And I think with that I think it's an opportunity to have your voice heard, to protest what is happening across the country. You're not protesting the military, you're protesting Donald Trump and his actions towards what he's doing in communities, towards what he's doing to the American people and the people who serve, right? He has no respect for the people serving in the military or the intelligence community. He has shown us. We've seen what he calls people, right? And I think that to me is where I'm landing on it. But the other part of it is we have to really ensure that we don't take the bait and that there's no violence at these and that these protests don't become that, because I think that's what he wants. That is certainly.
I think that's exactly what he wants is for these. I think Stephen Miller's life would be complete if somebody shot or killed a cop or a soldier and then they could justify anything beyond that. I think
that's how you get to the Insurrection Act. And
that's right. That's how you get
I actually think that they can just take a lot of sort of separate incidents and loop them together, on Fox to make it seem like the whole city is on fire. And they can do the same thing with DC. They can a few protests and they'd be like, "This is disrespect for the military." It's not.
Most of America is seeing a very curated reality of what's happening in LA. Has there been some violence? Yes. Is most of this peaceful? 99% of it is. Is most of it confined to about a 4 square block area? Yes. I mean, I had a friend today who sent me pictures from LA of him walking his dog this morning in Santa Monica, and he's like, "Oh, the horror! Oh, this is the hellscape we live in." It's the idea that we're seeing is curated. Stuart,
Yeah, you have this 4-block, an insurrection is 4 blocks. I don't know. I mean, that's like,
it's like after a Philadelphia Eagles game,
exactly, where they're burning couches. The University of Kentucky loses. It's I don't know. I kind of would bet on the side of nuclear weapons versus a 4-block insurrection. I mean, the whole thing is so preposterous.
But that's what they want, right? They want to sell that's, when we take a stand against it, and when people will undoubtedly show up on Saturday and do the No Kings, they're going to do the counter protest.
Yep.
And Fox News and all these reporters and propaganda machines and the Trump team and Stephen Miller and all the little minions that enable this whole thing, they're going to be saying that this is, that these are people who support criminals. These are people who are attacking and undermining the military, who don't support our military. That's just not true. It just fundamentally.
I think Kristi Noem called the entire city of Los Angeles a city of criminals.
Right. She's got a city of criminals. Now, look, I'm sure LA has its proportion of criminals, but if there's a city of criminals in this country right now, it's Washington, D.C. Hey, well, listen, guys, I want to thank you, Jay and Olivia, for coming on. Check out Jay's Substack, The Status Quo, at QUO, and Olivia Troy, both of whom are terrific Substackers and communicators, where we're all sort of building this new news area. I want to thank everybody for watching this first block. Olivia and Jay, we're going to let you guys go. And I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight on Lincoln Square. Our audience has been growing just by leaps and bounds, folks, and it's all about you guys. And we are so deeply grateful for your support, for your encouragement, for joining Lincoln Square. We know that there is a shift happening in the media right now, and the traditional news media is not doing the job for this country. And we're proud to be here doing our little part, articulating where we are in this democracy, articulating where the fight is and can and should be. So tonight I want to wrap up. Joe, let's start with you. I think we had some really good insights tonight from some brilliant people. Tell people where they should be headed mentally and organizationally here as we come into the missile parade weekend, as LA keeps playing out, and as we come up towards No Kings.
I really think the No Kings protests are really important. If you're going, go and take someone with you. We need to grow this. The last segment was talking about how the threat and how enough Americans aren't either don't care or aren't awake enough because of the disinformation and everything else. We have to create a bunch of attention. And on one day, June 14th, all of us can do something to get attention on what we want this to be about, not on what Trump and Stephen Miller are trying to create.
Terrific. Stuart?
Well, look, I just want to thank both you guys, because you're out there doing your Substack thing, writing tremendous stuff. And everybody here should subscribe. And if you can, you have in your means, do a paid subscription. It's not very much. Subscribe to Lincoln Square, subscribe to Rick's Substack, Joe's Substack. There are 2 podcasts, 3 podcasts. Rick has the Enemies List and the Lincoln Project podcast. Joe has that Trippi show, though most of us really think of it as Alex's show, but that's a different discussion. And because no one's out there going to save ourselves. And we're doing this for the same reasons you're doing it, but we need your support. So thank you. And it's wherever we are, it's just beginning.
Yes.